This meeting is being recorded.
Good evening. Welcome to Cornerstone Home Inspector Education Center. Tonight's topic and webinar is chimney flashing. This is being presented by one of our owners, Scott Monfort, and I'll be sending it off to him in a minute. Just a couple of items for note. Please mute yourself if you're not already muted. And if you have any questions, you can unmute, ask your question, and then just always make sure you're muted after that. Upcoming webinars for our New Jersey home inspectors. We have New Jersey Home Inspector Ethics, July 14th. That's next week. You can sign up for that on our website. And then for our general members, our next webinar is New Home Features, July 21st. If you have any questions, again, just unmute yourself. Certificates will be emailed to you tonight. And I've updated the logo portion of the website. So if you want to download a logo after completing something, just log in there. The password is Cornerstone for that. Take it away, Scott.
Good evening, guys and gals. Welcome. Just want to just kind of say a few things. I've been doing this since 2003, and I got to tell you, I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of chimneys, and not every chimney, I was going to say very few chimneys I don't find an issue with. And tonight we're going to talk about flashing, but you know, there's a lot of factors: age of the house, type of chimney, type of materials they use. And, you know, just keep that in mind, you know, in order to really, I mean, we all kind of run our business how we want to run it, but I can tell you from experience, you know, whether you get on the roof, and I have a lot of pictures at the end that are from previous inspections, whether you get on the roof or up to the eaves with a ladder, you know, some people use drones, but try to get as close as you can to see the chimney, because a lot of times there's things you can't see unless you're on the roof or you're in a position, if you're in the back and you can see both sides, front, back. Sometimes I'll swing the ladder around to take a look at it. But what you'll learn in this session: understanding flashing components, mastering anatomy of chimney flashing systems, and how each element prevents water intrusion. Identify common defects, recognize installation errors, deterioration patterns, and failure points that compromise flashing performance. And then you got to report these findings clearly so your client understands. Use professional reporting language. Go back, Jim. Reporting language that limits liability and delivers actionable guidance to clients. I can tell you that I know a lot of roofers and a lot of guys that fabricate chimney flashing, and they all, you know, they're pretty close, but some do it a little differently, and some do it better than others. But you have to keep that in mind, that there's always a couple ways to do things. And even some of the work that I do, you know, there's always a different way to do stuff. So when you look at this, I don't think you're going to find a perfect chimney. Even new chimneys have issues. I've found issues with new chimneys. For the most part, they should be okay because they haven't been used yet. Why chimney flashing matters. Chimney flashing is one of the most common sources of roof and interior water intrusion into residential structures. Failed flashing can cause extensive damage to roof decking, insulation, structural framing, turning a minor defect into a costly repair. The home inspector's role: visual assessment, inspect accessible chimney flashing, and document visible defects. Defect identification, recognize installation errors and signs of flashing failure, and then again, document, report observed conditions, and recommend appropriate follow-up. So just don't say, hey, the chimney flashing is lifting, and leave it at that. A lot of people do that. So you got to make sure you have to make a recommendation, whether monitor for leakage, monitor for you know, further deterioration, whatever words you want to use. Make sure that you also do a follow-up. And every chimney, and at least from my experience, is when you find something wrong, you're going to have somebody come out and do a more extensive cameras. A lot of times you can't see down in the flue. You can see the top, you can see the bottom, you can see it flashing, the brick, maybe stick a mirror up the clean out and a flashlight and look up. And a lot of times we'll see stuff at the bottom of the chimney, and that could tell us if the flue liner is starting to deteriorate, because you'll see some of that terracotta clay liner at the bottom or pieces of it. Scope and limitations of inspection. Home inspectors perform visual inspections of accessible chimney flashing components. This means we observe what we can reasonably see from the ground, roof edge, or roof surface without performing destructive testing or removing materials. Our inspections have important limitations. We cannot see concealed flashing beneath the roof materials, inside wall cavities, or behind finished materials. We do not guarantee that chimneys are watertight, nor do we test flashing systems with water. Weather conditions, accessibility, and safety considerations may further limit what can be observed during any given inspection. Understanding these boundaries helps us set appropriate client expectations and protects us when documenting conditions in our reports. These are the state standards, and they're general example for state standards for Connecticut, Mass, Rhode Island, New York, and New Jersey. The inspector shall inspect the exterior wall covering, flashing, and trim all exterior doors, attached decks, balconies, stoops, steps, porches, and their associated railings, the eaves, soffits, fascia boards where accessible from the ground level, the vegetation, grading, surface drainage, retaining walls on the property, when any of these are likely to adversely affect the building, and walkways, patios, and driveways leading to the entrances. Go ahead, Jim. Chimney and roof penetration fundamentals. Why chimneys are high-risk roof penetrations. Chimneys present unique challenges as roof penetrations. Unlike plumbing vents or small exhaust pipes, chimneys create large openings through the roof system that must remain watertight despite significant size and exposure. The intersections between chimney and roof creates multiple vulnerable points where water can potentially enter. Rain, snow, melt, and ice dams all work to exploit any weakness in the flashing system. Wind-driven rain is particularly problematic, forcing water into gaps that might otherwise remain dry. So you could have a problem. The chimney might be okay when it rains lightly, and then when you have a storm like we did yesterday, you might have a problem. And there's a lot of reasons why that may occur. And it may not always be the chimney flashing. It could also be, the crown could be worn, water could be getting behind the bricks, through the bricks, over the flashing. There's a lot of reasons why water can get around that chimney. Additionally, chimneys typically extend well above the roof surface, creating a large surface area that intercepts precipitation and directs it towards a roof junction, especially where proper flashing is critical. Actually, well, we'll talk that last chimney had some issues, but traditional brick or block construction with flashing embedded in mortar joints, heavier, more substantial, but subject to masonry deterioration and settlement. Flashing typically includes step flashing, counter flashing, cut into masonry, and often requires a cricket. That would be masonry chimneys, factory-built chimneys, metal chimneys with manufacturer storm collars and flashing kits, lighter weight, easier to flash, but prone to rust and corrosion. Flashing is typically surface-mounted rather than embedded, different inspection considerations and defect patterns. So a lot of times on new roofs, with the when I inspect, if it's a new roof and the chimney is rusted, or even the flashing is rusted, I make sure I call that out. And even the caps could be blown off. So those are some things you can see right from the ground. If you see rust, eventually it could start to pit and leak. And then the flashing a lot of times is in bad shape, or there's a lot of heavy tar around it after they put the new roof on. I generally, like skylights, recommend redoing flashing, or in this case, replace that whole pipe all the way up. Most people don't do that. Go ahead, Jim. Differential movement, a critical concept. Chimneys and roof surfaces move independently. The chimney, whether masonry or factory built, settles, shifts, and responds to temperature changes differently than wood frame roof systems. Masonry chimneys are particularly prone to settlement, especially when built on separate footings. Wood roof systems expand, contract, and flex with seasonal changes and structural loads. This differential movement creates stress at the chimney roof junction. Proper flashing system must accommodate this movement. Rigid connections or flashing that doesn't allow for independent movement will eventually fail, creating gaps that will allow water intrusion. This is why mechanical flashing systems perform better than caulk-only repairs or roofing tar repairs, which we see a lot of. Go ahead, Jim. How roof slope affects flashing. So if you look here, roof slopes, flat roof, 0 to 2. And if you're not sure how that works, if you were to take a level and go out 12 inches and measure down, if it's level, and measure down to the roof. If it's 2 inches, 1 inch, 4 inches, 12 inches, that's how you determine the roof pitch. So you have a level, go out 12 inches, measure down, and you can determine the roof pitch. So obviously roofs that are much steeper, will shed that water. So better water shedding, reduced ponding, easier to maintain, proper overlaps, gravity assist, water movement away from the penetrations. Moderate slopes, a 4 to 8 pitch, most common residential pitch, standard flashing details work well when properly installed, adequate water shedding with correct overlaps. And then low slopes. In this case, if you start getting around a 2 pitch, in some cases you'll see a 4 pitch where they'll actually use roll roofing, which is less chance of having any leaks, especially around the chimney, skylights, or even the roof itself. So slower water movement increases exposure time at joints, greater reliance on sealants and waterproof membranes, higher risk of wind-driven rain intrusion. Chimney locations. Ridge or near ridge chimneys are generally easier to flash properly because water flows from the chimney on both sides. These locations minimize water volume concentration at the chimney base. Mid-slope are most common but present greater challenges. All water from the roof area above the chimney flows past it, increasing the volume of water the flashing must manage, especially behind the chimney. These locations typically require a cricket or saddle behind the chimney. And some guys don't always do it, but if it's 30 inches or wider, you got to have a cricket behind it. And a cricket, it's like a little pitched roof that allows water. And it's either they'll do it with, they'll build a wood cricket, or they'll do it with copper. And the more expensive homes, a lot of times they'll do that cricket with copper. Eave area chimneys are less common but create unique challenges, particularly regarding ice dam formations and debris accumulation. Even in mid-slope roof, when I get up on the roof, I see a lot of debris behind there. Lower slope angles at eaves can increase water intrusion. Locations affect not only water management, but also accessibility for inspection, maintenance, and future repairs. If you're watching this, viewing code CF8382. Components of proper chimney flashing. Go ahead, Jim. The complete flashing system. Step flashing, individual L-shaped pieces woven with each course of shingle along chimney sides. Base flashing.
Alex, you have to go to, what you call it right now? Okay. We got you pancakes too. There's like 6 pancakes.
Can you
because it's easier for us to get.
Matt, can you hit your, there you go.
I got him.
Base flashing. Apron. Oh, I just want to apron at the front where water first encounters the penetration. Counter flashing covers step flashing embedded into masonry joints or surface mounted. Back flashing behind the chimney. So aprons in the front, back is, as the name applies, back flashing, upper flashing where water flows down the roof above the chimney, cricket, saddle, peak structure diverting water around the chimney. Hold on one sec. So I don't know if you guys can see this. So if you look at this would be a step flashing. These are actually smaller pieces. It's what I had in the garage. So this would be your step flashing, right? Step flashing. I kind of bent some. And then if you look over here, I kind of fabricated this piece. And then this would be your counter flashing, and I'll show you how it all comes together. So if you can see this, this piece would be, this would be in front of the chimney, and I'm going to turn it sideways. It kind of sticks out a little bit. I actually crimp this. So the step flashing, and then your counter flashing. Go ahead, Jim. So step flashing consists of individual L-shaped metal pieces installed in a step pattern along both sides of the chimney. Each piece is woven with a course of shingles, creating a water shedding overlap that directs water down and away from the chimney. Proper installation requires individual pieces, not continuous runs. Now, I will say with lead flashing on a chimney, some guys will create a pan. They'll create a pan, so it would look like this. It would be a pan that they create, right? And they run it all the way along, and sometimes they'll embed it into the chimney, and then they'll run lead over the top, and then they'll do you really want 3 layers of protection, right? You want ice and water shield, step flashing, and counter flashing. Some guys will even do 4 layers of protection. They'll do ice and water shield. They'll do a pan. They'll do lead over the top of it, embedded, and then they'll do counter flashing over the top. Each piece overlapping at least 4 inches, 3-4 inches, sometimes a little bit more. Vertical leg extending 4 to 5 inches up the chimney face. So these guys here have to be overlapping, and then it has to go far enough up the chimney. And each piece installed with each shingle course. So, sorry guys, but I'm going to show you my little brick house here, right? I don't know if you can see it. I know it's crazy. So here's one piece, right? There's your step flashing. And generally the step flashing will extend a little bit. If this chimney is near the eaves, if you can see this, I'll try my best here. If you see, this is the eaves. Right over here is the eaves of the house. If the chimney's near the eaves, you're not going to run this all the way down to the eaves. This is going to be probably a little bit beyond the chimney, inch or so. And then you'll have, hold on, I'm trying here. He's like, where did he get all this stuff? So now you have your step flashing. And there's your shingle. I don't know if you guys can see that. There's the shingle. And then the next step flashing will go over the top like that, over the top of the shingle, right? Usually down to the nailing line, and then your next course of shingles on top of this, and you just keep going all the way up. Step flashing should never be visible on a properly completed installation. It should be covered by counter flashing on the chimney side and by the shingles on the roof side. Sometimes you may see a little bit, but a lot of times guys on their counter flashing, you'll see this a lot of times on their counter flashing, they'll actually bend a piece of that counter flashing instead of it looking like this. Instead of it just going over the top of it like that, they'll actually bend this out a little bit and it'll extend over on the roof. Just another layer of protection. But the first thing you got to do is a layer, you're gonna put a layer of ice and water shield that'll go up the chimney. So it's a layer of ice and water shield, right? Step flashing and then counter flashing. Go ahead, Jim. Base or apron flashing at chimney front. The base or apron flashing is installed where shingles first meet the chimney on the downslope. So that would be kind of the front of the chimney. This is often the first point where water flowing down the roof encounters the chimney penetration. Proper base flashing extends under the shingles on the roof side and up the chimney face on the vertical side. So that means if the end of the chimney is here, right? This is the end of the chimney. That base flashing, as you can see by this cardboard here, that base flashing extends underneath. So as water runs down, right, as water runs down, you don't want the water to come in at this joint here. So it'll get extended underneath. You're not always going to see it. You shouldn't see it. Common defects at base include inadequate coverage, missing counter flashing protection, or reliance on sealants alone. The apron must be mechanically fastened and properly integrated with the rest of the flashing system. Caulk is not sufficient. So I bent this together. These were 2 separate pieces. Let me show you. So here is the side of the chimney. This is the side of the chimney right here. And this is the front of the chimney. Side, front. So now this piece and this piece join together instead of just being butted up together and then a bunch of caulk in there. If you see a lot of caulk in those corners, no good. So these 2 guys go together and then you create this. Look at that. It's mechanically fastened. I just crimped this together, kind of like a standing seam roof. And that's the way it should be. And it actually extends out from the chimney a little bit. So when water runs down, it runs down and it's not going to get back in. And then, of course, you got your step flashing and your ice and water shield. Purpose and function. Counter flashing covers and protects the top edges of the step and base flashing from wind-driven rain. It creates a watertight cover while allowing for differential movement between chimney and roof. So the good thing about this is you can get some movement out of it. And it's, you know, if you just have caulk and you get a little bit of movement, that caulk may separate, or that tar. And a lot of guys go up there when they put a new roof on, it becomes a cost factor, and they'll say, you know, oh, we can use the pre-existing chimney flashing. And in my opinion, and most of the guys I know very well, if you put a new roof on, you should replace the flashing and not just shove the shingles underneath. And, you know, remember, you're putting holes in step flashing to begin with. Now you're going to add more holes, and you're shoving everything up underneath, and you're caulking, and then they tar all of that. If you see tar all over it and all this caulk, I call that out, because it's going to leak. Eventually it'll leak. Maybe not right away, but it will. Cut-in counter flashing. Preferred for masonry chimneys, flashing is embedded in rake mortar joints. Then the joints are repointed, provide secure, long-lasting attachment that resists wind, uplift, and movement. So here we go. Sorry, guys, it's not a real chimney. So it's embedded, right? Usually the guys will cut in about an inch to inch and a quarter. They'll embed the flashing in. I don't know if you can see that. Let me try to bring it over here. So you see that flashing? It's embedded in there. And a lot of guys will run GSL, like a polyurethane. There's a bunch of different name brands out there. They'll run in caulk in there. They'll slide this in. So they'll slide it in. They'll cut a groove in the chimney all the way down. They'll cut it all the way down, whether they're going to step it or they're going to run a straight line. They'll put it in there. They'll caulk it. And now this joint over here is completely sealed. It's a mechanically fastened. There's no way water can get in there. Surface mounted counter flashing. Surface mounted, attached directly to the chimney face. So they just attach the flashing to the face. They caulk it. They may drive in. I've seen roofing nails. I've seen concrete nails. I've seen I've seen all kinds of stuff. With masonry anchors or screws, more common on factory-built chimneys or as retrofit installations. Require proper sealing at the top edge, but is more vulnerable to failure over time. No one's saying you can't use caulk, but you know, you should use caulk and mechanical fastening. A lot of guys will do both. They'll even caulk behind here. So this counter flashing is put on, and they'll run a bead of caulk here, 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 all along. And that's just one more layer of protection. So top edges are set into the mortar. A joint is repointed, so a lot of times they'll use mortar. I don't see mortar as much. Newer chimneys, you might see mortar, but older chimneys, a lot of times they'll use GSL 3000. It's a masonry polyurethane caulk. They'll squirt it in. They'll put it underneath the cap flashing, counter flashing, cap flashing, and then they'll embed it into that joint and then fill it all up. Using mortar, it's a little bit more labor intensive, but a lot of guys, a lot of masons will do that, especially with a new construction. You can see in this picture, you can see the apron flashing, and then up top there is the base flashing, and underneath there should be step flashing. If you notice, the apron flashing extends on top of the shingles, right? So as water comes down, if you notice, that corner is very similar to the corner that I made. They extend that copper out and bend it over a little bit. So now that water, instead of when it flows down the roof, it's not going to hit that corner. It's going to drain away from it. It's just another layer. It's the right way to do it. And then there's the surface mount. I usually see maybe a surface mount on a repair, but most of the time you'll see it embedded. You know, they'll cut a new line. You'll see where the old flashing was sometimes. They'll go a little higher to cover it. This is going to require a lot of maintenance. It's more prone to separation. If you do see that counter flashing, there's a gap on top there. If you see it wide open, if you see this is open, and sometimes there's caulk, sometimes there's roofing tar, or the tar is cracked, that's a problem. It's going to leak. Go ahead, Jim. Back flashing and chimney crickets. The back or upper side of the chimney, where it meets the roof slope above, presents the greatest water management challenge, obviously, because water comes down the roof and then hits the backside. This area receives the full volume of water flowing down the roof from above. For chimneys wider than 30 inches, building code typically requires a cricket, also known as a saddle. This is a peak structure that divides water flow around both sides of the chimney rather than allow it to pond against the back face. Back flashing covers the cricket and integrates with step flashing on both sides. Without a cricket, water and debris accumulate behind the chimney, dramatically increasing the risk of water intrusion. Crickets are often missing, or older installations are improperly sized chimneys. You know, I've seen crickets on smaller chimneys. My chimney has a cricket. It's probably greater than 30 inches. And some guys will do something similar to what you see here in this picture with copper. And unless there's a lot of debris up there, now this roof is low enough where you can get up there and you can look behind there. A lot of times you'll see leaves, twigs, all kinds of debris behind there. And I always point that out to tell people that has to be kept clean. But, you know, you're supposed to have a cricket. And if the chimney is smaller, 24 inches, and you see a cricket, this one up top here, you can see a roof cricket up here. I don't think that's exactly 24 inches, but still, it's not a bad idea to do it. And a lot of roofers will do it. They'll build a cricket, or they'll fabricate copper and do a real nice. Copper is more expensive, though. And, you know, what you see mostly is copper. You'll see aluminum. You'll see lead, copper-coated lead. Why mechanical fastening beats sealants? Mechanical fastening sheds water through overlapping layers, accommodates differential movement, long service life, 20 to 50 years, requires minimal maintenance, functions even when sealants fail. So this mechanical joint that I just did before this seminar, you know, I just crimped it together. I can't even get it apart, right? If that's just bent over and a little caulk in there, it's going to separate. This is not going to separate. And this is the tool that I did it with right here. It's a seamer. That's all I did, is just went right along, and that's it. Sealant-only solutions creates rigid barrier that cracks, cannot accommodate movement, short service life, 1 to 3 years, requires frequent reapplication, fails rapidly in UV exposure. Proper flashing relies on gravity, geometry to shed water, not on adhesives to keep it out. Sealant should be only supplemental to mechanical flashing, never a substitute. So you'll see a lot of guys do both, and that's fine. Chimney flashing by roofing material. Go ahead, Jim. Asphalt shingle roofs are most common residential roofing material in the United States, making proper chimney flashing at these intersections a critical inspection point. Key installation requirements: step flashing pieces interwoven with each shingle course, minimum 4-inch headlap between flashing pieces, counter flashing overlap step flashing by 4 inches, base flashing extending under the shingles by at least 6 inches. All flashing visible from roof surface should be covered. So you may not see everything. You're probably going to see a lot of, but I will tell you, if the counter flashing, apron, and base flashing look pretty good, chances are they did everything else right. No guarantee, but again, if it looks, you could just tell from the ground. If you see tar, you see a whole bunch of caulk, you see all the mortar joints caulked, you see moss growing out of it. The chimney, forget about the flashing. There's a lot of other issues there, and almost every chimney has something wrong with it. And certainly when they do a further inspection of the chimney, or they have to make repairs, repointing, a new crown, a new liner, that flashing should be addressed as well. And that's, you have to document stuff. So this way, at least you're doing what's right by your client. At the same time, you're pointing out the deficiencies you find. Architectural versus 3-tab shingle consideration. 3-tab shingles, thinner profile makes step flashing integration straightforward. Flashing pieces are easily concealed. Regular pattern simplifies proper overlap sequence, less likely to create uneven surfaces. That's true, right? Architectural is not flat like 3-tabs, which we don't see too much 3-tab anymore. We see mostly architectural shingles. Thicker, multi-layered construction can make proper flashing integration more challenging. Random pattern requires careful attention to overlap sequences, may create gaps if flashing isn't properly fit fitted to irregular surfaces. Both shingle types can be properly flashed, but architectural shingles require more care during installation. Look for uneven surfaces or visible gaps that may indicate integration problems. Metal roof flashing transitions. Metal roofing system present unique flashing challenges due to thermal expansion, smooth surface that shed water rapidly, and different fastening requirements compared to shingle roofs. Standing seam metal roofs require flashing that accommodates panel movement. Through fastened metal roofs need careful attention to prevent creating new penetration points. In both cases, flashing must be designed to match the water flow characteristics of metal, which moves water much faster than shingles. Common issues include improper sealant application, metal expands, contracts significantly, inadequate overlap dimensions, and failure to account for increased water velocity. Professional installation by a qualified metal roofing contractor is particularly important at chimney penetrations. We don't see a lot of metal roofs, but from time to time, the ones I do see, it's the chimney, it's the roof penetrations, the plumbing vents. You can see there's a lot of caulk, not so much roofing tar. You'll see a lot of silicone caulk around there. That's a problem. It's probably leaked. It's leaked around the chimney, and you definitely want to document that. Slate tile and specialty roof systems. Rigid slate requires precise cutting and fitting around chimneys. Step flashing must accommodate thick material. Counter flashing details are similar to shingle roofs but require greater precision. Repairs are more complex and extensive. These premium roof materials require specialized flashing techniques. Defects may be more difficult to identify, and repairs typically require contractors experienced with those specific materials. If you look over here with this roof, this clay tile, or might be concrete. If you notice, this is lead flashing. Lead flashing is easier to work. If you notice, you see the counter flashing, they extend it away from the chimney. There's definitely mechanical fasteners on there. You can see some polyurethane caulk. They probably created a pan. They probably ice and water shield. They may have done a pan. Then they did some step flashing embedded, and then went a little higher, and then put your counter flashing. So low slope roof considerations near chimney. Increased risk factors because water moves more slowly on a low slope roof. It remains in contact with potential intrusion points for a longer period, making ponding more likely, especially behind chimneys. As a result, standard flashing overlap dimensions that perform adequately on steeper roofs may prove insufficient in these conditions. Modified flashing requirements. Low slope chimney flashings often require fully adhered membrane flashing rather than metal alone, along with increased overlap dimensions of 6 inches or more rather than the standard 4 inches. So you might have to overlap a little bit more. And that's, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and you're never going to see it. Additional layers of waterproofing are typically necessary, and the assembly demands for more frequent maintenance than conventional installations. So not only do you have the ice and water shield, you have your synthetic or your felt paper, your ice and water shield, your step flashing, your counter flashing. And I've even, there's a roofer out in Fairfield who actually solders, more expensive, solders the copper. Common chimney flashing defects. This is a big one. Missing or improperly installed step flashing. Missing step flashing is one of the most serious defects you will encounter. Within individual step flashing pieces woven into each shingle course, there is no proper water shedding mechanism along the chimney sides. Water inevitably finds its way behind the roofing material. Sometimes step flashing is present but improperly installed. For example, right? It's supposed to be, if this is the slope, this should go over this one, not this one over that one, which is common sense, right? If you overlap it, water can get behind it this way. It can get behind it in here. It should be this one, this overlaps, the next one overlaps, the next one overlaps. Sometimes step flashing is present but improperly installed, include continuous strips instead of individual pieces. So they'll just use continuous strip instead of individual pieces. Insufficient overlap between pieces or flashing that's too short to extend properly under the shingles. So these pieces are kind of small. Not too short this way to go under the shingle and too short going up the shingle. And I've seen a lot of guys use these small pieces. These defects compromise the system's ability to shed water effectively. Step flashing defects are often concealed until counter flashing is removed or fails. Look for water stains on interior finishes near chimneys. You see the wood around the chimney, rust stains on chimney face, or deteriorating shingles adjacent to the chimney, all potential indicators of step flashing problems. Now, again, if the house is old with a new roof and the flashing's all new and there's staining in the attic, chances are it's old. If it just rained and it's dry, it's probably old. If it's new, if a fairly new house and it's the original roof, maybe it's 10, 15 years and you see staining, there's a problem. Missing step flashing. That's kind of hard to see, but in this case, I got to be honest with this picture. I do see some step flashing, but for this picture, just forget the step flashing. What do you see wrong there? It's all roofing tar. It's covered. That probably was, well, that's an older roof, but somebody had a leak. I mean, that's the end of the house. So you probably had a leak, and then they went up there and the guy charged them to tar it up. Counter flashing not embedded into masonry. Surface mounted, we talked about that before. And then there's a reglet cut, 20 years or more. So basically they're cutting in a good inch and a quarter. Maybe this is not going in all the way. Maybe it's still going in 3/4 inch. Maybe it's going in an inch. That's hard to tell. But you can kind of look and say it's definitely going into the chimney versus being surface mounted. Surface mounted counter flashing that relies solely on caulk for weather tightness is a very common defect on chimneys, while surface mounting can work when properly installed with mechanical fasteners. Many installations rely on adhesives or caulk. Caulk fails relatively quick due to the UV exposure, thermal cycling, expanding contraction, and differential movement. Once the seal fails, wind-driven rain easily penetrates behind the counter flashing, running down the chimney face and behind the step flashing where it enters the roof system. So if that fails, water can get behind the step flashing. It runs behind the counter flashing. If it's not embedded and it gets behind it, it can get down here, it can get behind the ice and water shield, and it can leak. Look for cracks, separated or missing caulk at the top edge of counter flashing. Check for rust stains or white efflorescence below counter flashing. Salts, minerals deposited when water dries indicates that water is running behind it. Proper cut-in installation eliminates this problem. The caulk and roofing cement problem. Why sealants fail. UV degradation breaks down compounds. Thermal cycle causes cracking. Differential movement. Trap moisture behind the caulk. Typical service life 1 to 3 years. Common misapplication. Used as primary flashing instead of supplemental. Applied over deteriorated flashing to fix leaks, which we see all the time. Silicone, roofing tar. Used to attach counter flashing to masonry. Substitute for proper step flashing and covering over missing crickets. So a lot of times in the back where there's a missing cricket, what do we see in the back of the chimney? We see a lot of tar, right? Maybe the chimney is 30 inches, maybe it's 24 inches, but you see a lot of tar in the back there. They had a leak, and maybe it wasn't the flashing. If the crown is deteriorated or cracked and bricks are loose and moss is growing, water could be going down inside the chimney, and they just think it's got to be the flashing. Somebody gets up there, charges them a few $100 just to throw some caulk up there. Corroded, loose, or damaged flashing. Metal flashing deteriorates over time, particularly in coastal areas. Why in coastal areas? Salt. Humid climates or weather. Dissimilar metals create a galvanic corrosion. So if it's copper and aluminum, this is going to fail, just like decks. You ever see pressure-treated decks with the aluminum flashing? It's all deteriorated, 20, 30, the old stuff, the really good pressure-treated. You go look underneath and all the flashing shot. Same thing with lead. You know, stainless steel, probably not. And then if you have steel with copper, you could have a problem with corrosion. Aluminum flashing is particularly vulnerable when in contact with masonry or when exposed to alkaline conditions. I'm not a big fan of aluminum on chimneys, although I do see it. I make note of it. And sometimes you guys, when you see aluminum, you'll see it corroded and start to deteriorate and it's falling apart. And then some guy gets up there and caulks it. So I always make note of that. Rust holes, edge corrosion, and material breakdown compromise the flashing's ability to shed water. Even small perforations can allow significant water intrusion. Corrosion often begins at fastener locations or where flashing pieces overlap. Loose flashing, whether from failed fasteners, deteriorated caulk, or physical damage, allows wind-driven rain to penetrate behind the flashing system. Look for flashing that appears lifted, bent, or that moves when pressed. These conditions typically require complete flashing replacement, not just repairs. And that would be up to the roofer to make that determination. You call it out and you have somebody who's qualified to do flashing work and let them figure it out. Sometimes they'll just make a repair and it's temporary until the roof is replaced. If it's an old roof, they're good up there and do a temporary repair. And then when a new roof is installed, redo the flashing. Improper overlaps and reverse flashing laps. We talked about that. Each flashing piece must overlap the one below. We talked about that. When lower pieces overlap upper pieces, water is directed under the flashing instead of over it. This reverse shingle effect channels water directly into the roof system, a critical installation error. And that would usually be, I'm not going to knock a home improvement contractor, but if they're not a roofer and somebody has a problem and they hire somebody, they may redo the flashing and not do it right or use the wrong materials. Flashing concealed by siding or finishes. Counter flashing should extend at least 4 inches up the chimney face to properly protect underlying step flashing. However, subsequent exterior renovations sometimes bury flashing under new siding, stucco, exterior insulating finishing system, fake stucco, synthetic stucco systems. When exterior finishes cover the flashing, several problems arise. First, the flashing can no longer function properly. It needs to overlap roofing materials from above, not be sandwiched between layers. Second, moisture from roof level water intrusion can become trapped behind a new finish, causing hidden damage. Look for situations where siding or stucco extends down to within an inch or two of the roofing material. This often indicates concealed flashing. Properly detailed installations maintain a clear separation with visible flashing between roof and wall surfaces. We actually see a lot of older homes where the siding is right on the roof and the siding's rotted. Sometimes for appearance-wise, the sider doesn't want to have that 2-inch gap where you see the step flashing. And sometimes they'll run a board along the bottom to try to cover it a little bit. Evidence of interior moisture. You guys see this all the time. You look down below, you look up at the ceiling in the living room and you see staining. Sometimes it's old. Sometimes it's been, painted. Sometimes it's restained. You see it in the attic. You might see it on the second floor. You might see it on the wall where the chimney is inside the wall. Water stains on ceiling adjacent or below chimney strongly suggests flashing failure. And it may not just be the flashing. It could be other parts of the chimney, as I said earlier. Active or recent intrusion appears as dark stains. Old intrusion may show a yellowish discoloration. Wall damage, staining, paint peeling, or wallpaper damage on walls near chimneys indicate water running down inside wall cavities, often accompanied by musty odors or visible mold growth in severe cases. Sometimes the chimney is leaking up at the ridge, and you see the damage along the eaves. It's running down the rafter in another spot, maybe in another room. And then when you get up in the attic, you kind of have to take a look to see it. Is it the chimney, or is it the plumbing vent, or is it the AC air handler? In attics, look for water stain or deteriorated framing members near the chimney. Dark staining on roof decking around chimney penetrations is particularly concerning. Always correlate exterior flashing conditions with interior evidence. Interior damage confirms that exterior defects are causing active or previous water intrusion. If it hasn't rained and there's a stain, I make note of it, especially if the chimney has issues when you're outside. Viewing code, if you're watching this, is HF6251. Identifying past repairs and patching. Visual indicators of previous repairs. Look for mismatched flashing materials. You'll see a new roofer, and then they'll put aluminum. They'll have the old copper. It's bent up. They shove the shingles underneath, and then they put a whole bunch of roofing tar on it. Different metal colors or finishes, and excessive caulk or roofing cement application. Quality assessment. Determine whether repairs were done professionally or appeared to be temporary fixes. Professional repairs typically show proper overlap, mechanical fastening, and materials compatibility. DIY fixes often rely heavy on sealants. And sometimes when people are in a panic and the roof is leaking, they call whoever they can get, and they come out and just put a lot of caulk on it, roofing tar. Recognize concealed or inaccessible areas. Much of properly installed flashing system is intentionally concealed beneath roof materials and counter flashing. You cannot see step flashing pieces under shingles, cannot observe the embedment of counter flashing in mortar joints, and cannot verify proper overlap sequences. You probably could see, you might be able to see the counter flashing a little bit on the bottom, and you can see if it's kind of bent in or on the face. You just really got to look how far it is, how far that bend is, and embedded into the masonry. You don't know. As long as the caulk looks pretty good that they use, the polyurethane caulk, as long as it's not deteriorated, you should be okay. But, make note if you see any problems. Commonly concealed flashing areas: step flashing, base flashing on the bottom, top edges of counter flashing and mortar joints, cricket flashing beneath roofing, back portions of wide chimneys from ground level. If you can't see it, make sure you put in your report you can't see it. If you can't get up on the roof, or maybe in this spot you can't see it, if you put the ladder on the back, just make note. Go ahead, Jim. Reporting chimney flashing conditions. Writing clear and defensible narratives. Your inspection report is a legal document. Vague language like chimney flashing appears okay offers neither adequate information nor professional protection. Describe what you observe, explain implications, and provide clear recommendations using specific terminology. Always distinguish between visible and concealed or inaccessible conditions. Balance technical precision with client accessible language. Avoid guarantees. Explain concepts plainly and use photos to enhance understanding. Distinguishing maintenance versus defects. Maintenance issues. Conditions that represent normal wear, requiring routine attention but not immediate safety concern. Example: minor caulk deterioration at counter flashing, small rust spots on old flashing, minor debris accumulation behind chimney. Recommend monitoring and routine maintenance, or even have it further evaluated. Defects requiring repair. Conditions that compromise the flashing system's function or inadequate and proper installation. Examples: missing step flashing, you may not be able to see that. Unsealed counter flashing edges, you're going to see that. Lifting counter flashing pulled up, separated. Missing cricket where required. Significant corrosion with holes. Recommend professional evaluation and repair. Safety concerns. Conditions representing immediate risk or evidence of active water intrusion causing damage. Loose flashing creating fall hazards. Active leaking confirmed by interior damage. Severe deteriorated structural components. Recommend immediate professional attention. Sometimes the bricks are so loose. You get up there, the bricks are loose, the mortar joints are crumbling, and all that flashing is falling apart, is pulling away. And in that case, it's probably going to have to be rebuilt from the roof line up. Observation, implication, recommendation, structure. Observation, factual description of what you saw. Counter flashing along the chimney side appears to be surface mounted with caulk rather than embedded into masonry joints. 2, implication, explain why it matters. Caulk seals deteriorate over time from UV exposure and differential movement, potentially allowing water intrusion behind the counter flashing. Recommendation, suggest appropriate action. Recommend evaluation by a qualified roofing contractor to assess condition and determine if proper cut-in counter flashing should be installed. Go ahead, Jim.
This, Scott, just to break in for a second, this really should be a 4-part structure, with the last being limitation of inspection. Maybe you couldn't get on the roof, you're going to see it with your binoculars, whatever the reason, but it's a 4-part. Sorry. Go ahead.
Avoiding guarantees of watertight performance. Never guarantee that flashing is or will remain watertight. Every flashing that appears properly installed can fail under certain conditions, and much of the flashing system is concealed from view during a visual inspection. Avoid language. Chimney flashing is watertight. No water intrusion will occur. Flashing is in perfect condition. This should never leak. Instead, use conditional language. Flashing appears, couching words. Flashing appears to be properly installed and is in serviceable, good condition, satisfactory condition. No evidence of water intrusion was observed at the time of inspection. Visible flashing components appear adequate. Recommend periodic monitoring or for signs of future water intrusion. This language acknowledges the limits of visual inspection while providing valuable information to your client. Sample reporting language, proper installation, example, satisfactory condition. Observation, chimney flashing consists of individual step flashing pieces interwoven with shingle courses, covered by counter flashing that appears to be embedded into masonry joints. Again, you're not going to probably see this stuff. A cricket is present at the rear of the chimney. Visible flashing components appear to be serviceable condition with no obvious defects or damage noted. Implication, this configuration represents proper installation methods. The flashing system appears capable of preventing water intrusion when properly maintained. Recommendations, monitor flashing condition periodically, particularly counter flashing, seals, and step flashing at lower edges. Consider having flashing inspected by qualified roofing contractor if any water staining is noted near the chimney or during roof replacement projects. Limitations. Much of the flashing system is concealed beneath roofing materials and cannot be directly observed. This inspection does not guarantee watertight performance.
You guys really put all of that in your report?
No. I can. This is probably right here. Yeah, this is one I put in just to give you an idea. And I don't necessarily put observation recommendation. You can, however you do your report. The brick masonry chimney has a worn crown and deteriorated mortar joints. The flashing has been heavily patched with roofing tar indicating past leakage, which is supported by staining observed in the attic and kitchen ceiling below. Patching is considered a temporary repair. Then I would go recommendation. Recommend evaluation by quality chimney contract to assess the flashing flue liner and masonry components, provide a repair estimate, and perform repairs as needed. That's what I used. That's mine. I put that in there. The next one, observation. The chimney has a deteriorated mortar joints and a cracked, worn crown. The chimney appears to be abandoned. This is one I had a few months ago. As the boiler is sidewall vented through the foundation, a complete evaluation was not possible due to weather conditions, limited access, and the roof pitch. Implication, deteriorated masonry can allow water intrusion and continued deterioration. If the chimney is abandoned, repairs may not be necessary if removal is planned. Consult with a qualified chimney contractor to verify chimney status and evaluate its condition prior to purchase. And you can shorten that.
Scott, let me interrupt for a second. We all write reports differently. What I'm trying to do with the 4-part narrative in my reports is that observation implication is really important. If you see Scott on the second one here where he says the chimney is deteriorated, more joints and cracked, worn crown, the chimney appears to be abandoned as the boiler is blah, blah, blah. He goes, a complete evaluation was not possible due to weather conditions, limited access, and the roof pitch. That's fine that's in there. That's a limitation of inspection. So he has observation, limitation, and he also has the implication in there. So it's all in there. It's just how you want to format it on your report.
And you can concise it a little bit more. Things I want to bring more attention to, I might write a little bit more. And I have a summary narrative of important concerns. And if it's something really important, I'll explain it a little bit more than most things in my report. So these are from previous reports. I think there's another one. Jim, did you go to the next one? Let me see.
Yeah.
Observation. Yeah. And I don't necessarily write observation recommendation. I put them in here for the presentation. The chimney flashing is patched, deteriorated, and cracked, making it susceptible to water intrusion. Patching is considered a temporary repair and does not provide long-term waterproof seal. Recommend having a qualified roofer repair the flashing, install new chimney flashing when roof is replaced to ensure durable watertight insulation. The roof has notable sags, dips near the base of the chimney. The counter, now, obviously, you wouldn't know that if you didn't get up, so I got up here. The counter flashing appears to be improperly installed with areas of lifting and excessive caulking observed. The installation of step flashing, ice and water shield could not be confirmed. Recommend repairs, further evaluate, monitor, whatever you want to use by a qualified roofing contractor, correct these deficiencies. And you can add in there too, prior to if you have everything in my report is these things should be addressed prior to purchase, where you get an estimate, where you have somebody come out and give you, further evaluate. As long as you put it in your report, observation, recommendation, implications, that's fine. Visible chimney flashing appears to be satisfactory condition with no significant defects observed. A chimney cricket is present. The flashing appears to be properly installed and functioning as intended at the time of inspection. Recommendation: monitor the flashing for deterioration, signs of leak, have it evaluated by a qualified roofing contractor if leaks develop or when the roof is replaced. Limitations: portion of the flashing system, including components concealed beneath the roofing materials and counter flashing, could not be fully inspected. Watertight performance cannot be guaranteed. That's something I would put in my report. This is actually something I put in my reports. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, so basically, one of the things I wanted to point out, we'll go back to this slide. I try to stay away from, and I think most inspectors should try to stay away from, is the extreme opposite of what we're showing here. Just you're walking around taking a picture, and I've seen reports where it just says acceptable, flashing, acceptable, chimney, acceptable, right? And what I like to do is have it very well organized, but have it more of the narrative. The more information you can put into the report, Scott said one of the things he said, and I heard him say it, was, I inspected it from the roof. That doesn't say it. He's assuming that his client knows that he inspected it from the roof, because how could he see the flashing otherwise? One of the things I do in my reports is method of inspection from the ground, from the roof.
This is just the narrative part, but in my report, it does say the method I inspected: from eaves by ladder, from ground with binoculars, eaves by ladder, and walk certain parts of the roof I could get on it. That is in my report. So at least, and obviously the client was with me too. And if they're not, but that's in there. Case example and discussion. Go ahead, Jim. I want to try to get to cosmetic repairs versus functional. The reality examination reveals the caulk is covering gaps where counter flashing has separated from the chimney. The underlying flashing shows rust and corrosion. No embedded counter flashing is present. Everything is surface mounted. Proper reporting. Document that recent caulk application is temporary, like I said before, temporary repair. That doesn't address underlying flashing defects. Explain that caulk will require reapplication every 1 to 3 years. I don't necessarily, you could do that, and that's probably not a bad thing to do, but it might be 6 months you might have to do it. So, if there's a problem, point it out, and eventually it should be fixed properly. And if it's an old roof, it should be done when the roof is replaced. And if it's a newer roof, then somebody should get up there and fix that flashing properly, especially this prefab. I would call this out all day. That's going to leak, especially at the ridge. Go ahead, Jim. Oh, we got a few minutes here. These are some of I threw these in here, guys, so you can see it. These are, every one of these I inspected, and almost every one you can see the problem. If you look at the first chimney to the left on top, copper, aluminum, shingles are falling off. You know what they did there? They put a new roof. That's a fairly new roof. They just shoved everything underneath. They lifted up all the counter flashing, the apron flashing, shoved the shingles underneath, put it back down, figure, I got a little gap there. Let me throw a little, they took a couple pieces of aluminum and bent it and shoved it in there. And you can see, not only is the chimney got problems, the flashing has problems, and now you're missing roof shingles. They probably didn't need to put the roof shingles over that apron flashing. If you look at the one in the middle, that's a problem, right? Now, you may not see that. If you guys are on the ground, this is a 2-story house. And if you don't get up on the roof, I guess you could see it with a drone. If you don't get up on the roof, you may not even see that if you put a ladder up to the eaves. So just keep that in mind. And you can see, you could probably notice. So there's definitely tar on the side of that. This one to the right here, copper or lead flashing, not a bad job. Not a bad job. Just kind of throw one in there. Wasn't awful. If you see that the lead is pulling away, make note of that. This is if you see this this flue pipe here, it's all caulk on there. They put the new roof on, went right over, and just threw a bunch of caulk. And I did have a picture where it was starting to rust on another pipe. This copper one, not bad at all. Not bad at all. Maybe they should have put a cricket back there, but it's not wide enough. But they didn't do a half bad job. This one is, there were two spots of this chimney, the lower roof and on top, and both of them had problems. You could see all the tar. There definitely was a leak inside. You can, and then somebody went up there and tarred the hell out of it. Point that out. That's a problem. If you look, this one to the top left, not awful, but again, they put some GSL. Would have been nice if they used a different color, but just make sure that's not cracked. And you may not see that. You may jump up on the roof and not jump on the roof, but there's other issues. This chimney here, I mean, forget about the flashing. If you look, the chimney crown is worn, deteriorated. If you look up the top right corner, there's like a brick that's missing. This one to the left, you could see there's all left lower. There's all tar on that. That might be lead too. That was just the picture smaller. This one over here, all caulk. You're not going to see that unless you'll see it on the side, and you may not see it if it's just on the back. There clearly it was leaking. There was an issue. The one over here, more tar, staining on the roof. This one to the left here is not. They did a nice job. See how that counter flashing? They bent it out a little bit, covering that step flashing. It's a pretty decent job. The one in the middle, more tar, old copper flashing. It's an older roof, 3-tab, and they just went up there and tarred the hell out of it. Obviously, it's an older roof, so they had a problem. This one over here, I just threw this in here. This is actually this house was in Milford. It was a mess. There was tar everywhere. That was a skylight, and that was just that. The chimney, everything. You see tar over here, the bottom left, the block, concrete block. You can see the crown is cracked. The wash, the crown, top of the chimney that sheds water. The flue is cracked. Over here is a prefab chimney. This one, this is one I had the other day. Prefab metal, rusted. The flashing was rusted. That one was kind of hard to see. And if you look over here, the lead. See the lead? The lead is deteriorating. Whether that is because if you look underneath, it looks like
tar.
Looks like tar. And you can see all the flashing all the way down. It's all deteriorated. Now, from the ground, you may not. Oh, that was tar. That it? All right. I thought I had a few more. Go ahead. Keep going. Next one.
I think we're done.
Yeah. So, just keep in mind, no chimney is perfect, and you just have to document what you see. And if you're not sure, make the call and have somebody come in. And again, the interior liner you can't see, and a lot of times, guys will put a camera in and they'll see all kinds of problems that you couldn't see. But based on if you see problems on the outside, there's a good chance that the liner could be affected as well. So just make sure you make note of that. There could be a problem with the liner, and as long as you do that, when the person moves in, it's all in your report. You made your recommendations, and whether I make recommendations all the time. And a lot of times they just want to get the house, and then they move in, and then they decide to have the chimney inspected, and then that's when there's problems. But at least you let them know about it, so it wasn't a surprise. But gentlemen,
listen, that was very, very informative. Thank you for the presentation tonight. Thank you everybody for coming. I'll get certificates out right away, and we'll see New Jersey people hopefully next Tuesday, and everybody else the Tuesday after that. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
Oh.
Go ahead.
What's your opinion on dissimilar metals in contact?
It's a problem. If you have aluminum with copper, this is the weaker metal. It's going to deteriorate. If you have, any dissimilar metals, just like brass, copper, any dissimilar metals, there'll be a problem. So a lot of guys, if they use lead, they'll use lead counterflashing. Copper, problem is money. So you will get guys, you'll see aluminum with copper, and that can be a problem. It could be definitely.
What about lead and aluminum?
Could be yep. Because it's a weaker metal. It could. A lot of guys that do lead. I mean, there's a guy in Fairfield. When he does lead, he'll do now stainless steel. He'll do a pan, then he'll wrap the pan with copper or with lead, and then he'll counter flash it over the top. So he'll do the pan, then he'll wrap it with lead, and then he'll go over the top. He'll do actually 4 layers of protection: ice and water shield. He'll do a pan, a continuous pan, rather than the step flashing, and then he'll wrap it with lead, and then he'll do the counter flashing on top. But yeah, and we see it all the time, right? You see, sometimes you'll see copper, and you might see this underneath. You know, a good chimney, the guy will use copper. It's more expensive, and it really comes down. The reason why people put new roofs on and they don't do the chimney is because there's it's $1,000, $2,000 less, and they don't want to pay the money, and the roofer will say, "Oh, I'll just put tar on it." They do it all the time. If they're $2,000 less than the other guy, they'll go with them. Now, you don't want the most expensive, you don't want the cheapest, the guy in the middle, but you want to make sure my roof, copper or lead, but I like copper. Some people say lead leaches down into the ground and all that, but I'm a copper guy. My chimney is copper, and it's been on there since 2007. Haven't had an issue. So yes, dissimilar metals can create a problem. Do you call it out? You could. I do. I put it in your report. It's not going to hurt. Is it leaking? Maybe, maybe not. Eventually, the biggest thing, look at decks. All these decks that we look at that are 30 years old, 40 years old, 25 years old, almost all the flashing that you see, the aluminum flashing that they use, do you ever see aluminum flash? It's all corroded and it's falling apart. That's because of the copper inside the pressure treated wood. So, the copper, aluminum, it deteriorates the weaker metal. And you'll see it deteriorate. Same thing with a chimney. Maybe not right away, but eventually it'll deteriorate. Nothing's perfect, and we have a tough job because you could almost find a problem with every chimney. It's, what's really bad, what's okay, is it leaking? And if you're unsure, just document what you see. And, always recommend to have that chimney cleaned and the interior flue evaluated, because you can't see it. And that could be a problem. You get a guy put a camera up there, it's too small. You can't burn anything. You can't use it. And then they're like all mad at you. So, well, I said to have it level 2 chimney inspection and camera and all that. You didn't do it. I'm sorry. And that's stuff that we hear all the time, the horror stories from the chimney guys that they say the inspector didn't tell us. He said it was just a little repointing. All I need a little caulk, couple $100, not expensive. And then you have to rebuild the whole top of the chimney. It costs thousands of dollars, and they're not happy. You're not an expert. You're a generalist. So, do your best, try. And if you can get on the roof, get on. If you can't, try to find a way to see that flashing at the top, the sides. If you see stuff growing out, you have a problem. You see weeds growing out of the top of it, there's a problem.
Okay. Well, any other questions? All right. Thank you, guys. See you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.